From theCUBE studios in Palo Alto and Boston, connecting with thought leaders all around the world, this is a CUBE Conversation.
Hi, I'm Dave Vellante, co-host of theCUBE, and welcome to DataOps in Action, made possible with support from IBM. You know, digital transformation is the new imperative. Digital means data, and a digital business uses data to compete. The problem is, organizations, they're not getting the most out of their data. Data is plentiful, but insights perhaps aren't. Why not? Well, data silos, poor data quality, communication and collaboration challenges, too many tools, questionable business buy-in, on and on and on. Put simply, everything data just seems to take too long. DataOps is a methodology borrowed from DevOps. The idea is to accelerate time to insights by automating the data pipeline, operationalizing data, and infusing AI into data and applications. Successful DataOps initiatives will not only cut cost, but also create greater productivity and revenue opportunities for businesses. DataOps, we think, will become a fundamental discipline in the coming decade. Now, in this crowd chat digital event, we're going to hear from practitioners who have been there and are doing that. Julie Lochner is an expert consultant on the topic. Inderpal Bhandari is IBM's Chief Data Officer with an internal example. And then most importantly, we bring in a panel of client experts, including Itumeleng Manali, who is the head of data management at Standard Bank, Victoria Stazowitz, who has vast experience in manufacturing and financial services, and also Steve Lewick from Associated Bank. All of these experts have hands-on experience with data ops. We also hear from Caitlin Halferty, who sits within IBM's CDO office and directs IBM's AI Accelerator. Here's how this is all going to go down. We have a video that we've compiled with these expert insights. We'll watch that video and then go into the crowd chat where you get to ask and answer questions from the community. The outcome is going to be a rich body of expertise that we can use to begin to better understand and implement data ops practices. So let's get started by looking at what data ops is all about. Please, roll the video.
Let's start with data ops. I mean, I think, a lot of people are familiar with DevOps. Maybe not everybody's familiar with data ops. What do we need to know about data ops?
Well, I mean, you bring up the point that everyone knows DevOps. And in fact, I think, what data ops really does is bring a lot of the benefits that DevOps did for application development to the data management organizations. So when we look at what is data ops, it's a data management It's a data management set of principles that helps organizations bring business-ready data to their consumers quickly. It borrows from DevOps similarly, where you have a data pipeline that associates a business value requirement. I have this business initiative, it's going to drive this much revenue or this much cost savings. This is the data that I need to be able to deliver it. How do I develop that pipeline and map to the data sources, know what data it is, know that I can trust it, so ensuring that it has the right quality, that I'm actually using the data that it was meant for, and then put it to use. So in history, most data management practices deployed a waterfall-like methodology or implementation methodology. And what that meant is all of the data pipeline projects were implemented serially, and it was done based on potentially a first in, first out program management office. With a DevOps mental model and the idea of being able to slice through all of the different silos that's required to collect the data, to organize it, to integrate it, to validate its quality, to create those data integration pipelines, and then present it to the dashboard, like if it's a Cognos dashboard or a operational process or even a data science team, that whole end-to-end process gets streamlined through what we're calling data ops methodology.
So, I mean, as you well know, we've been following this market since the early days of Hadoop, but people struggle with their data pipelines. It's complicated for them. There's a raft of tools, and they spend most of their time wrangling data, preparing data, improving data quality, different roles within the organization. So it sounds like, to borrow from DevOps, data ops is all about streamlining that data pipeline, helping people really understand and communicate across end to end, as you're saying, but But what's the ultimate business outcome that you're trying to drive?
So when you think about projects that require data to, again, cut cost, to automate a business process or drive new revenue initiatives, how long does it take to get from having access to the data to making it available? That duration for every time delay that is spent wasted trying to connect to data sources, trying to find subject matter experts that understand what the data means and can verify its quality. Like all of those steps along those different teams and different disciplines introduces delay in delivering high quality data fast. So the business value of data ops is always associated with something that the business is trying to achieve, but with a time element. So if it's for every day we don't have this data to make a decision, we're either making money or losing money. That's the value proposition of data ops. So it's about taking things that people are already doing today and figuring out the quickest way to do it through automation, through workflows, and just cutting through all of the political barriers that often happens when these data cross different organizational boundaries.
Yeah, so speed, time to insights is critical. But help us understand where you advise clients to start. I want to get into it. Where do I get started?
Yeah, I mean, so traditionally what we've seen with these large data management, data governance programs is that sometimes our customers feel like this is a big pill to swallow. And what we've said is, look, there's an opportunity here to quickly define a small project, align it to a high value business initiative, target something that you can quickly gain access to the data, map out these pipelines, and create a squad of skills. So it includes a person with DevOps type programming skills to automate and instrument a lot of the technology, a subject matter expert who understands the data sources and its meaning, a line of business executive who can translate bringing that information to the business project and associating with business value. So when we say, how do you get started? We've developed I would call it a pretty basic maturity model to help organizations figure out where are they in terms of the technology, where are they in terms of organizationally knowing who the right people should be involved in these projects. And then from a process perspective, we've developed some pretty prescriptive project plans that help you nail down what are the data elements that are critical for this business initiative. And then we have for each role what their jobs are to consolidate the data sets, map them together, and present them to the consumer. We find that 6-week projects, typically 3 sprints, are perfect times to be able to, a timeline to create one of these very short, quick win projects. Take that as an opportunity to figure out where your bottlenecks are in your own organization, where your skill shortages are, and then use the outcome of that 6-week sprint to then focus on filling in gaps, kick off the next project and iterate, celebrate the success, and promote the success because it's typically tied to a business value to help then create momentum for the next one.
Okay, so good setup by Julie. Now let's listen to Indipal Bhandari, who is the Global Chief Data Officer at IBM. He has real experience in a number of different use cases within the huge IBM organization. He talks about data quality, speed to insights, handling COVID better with data, and infusing AI into the data equation. And he shares some real-world metrics, not just adjectives. Take a listen.
Yes, from an infused AI into your business processing, right? The overarching outcome metric that one focuses on is end-to-end cycle time reduction. So you take that process, the end-to-end process, and you're trying to reduce the end-to-end cycle time by several factors, several orders of magnitude. And there are some examples of things that we did. For instance, in my organization that had to do with the generation of metadata, this data about data, and that's usually a very time-consuming process. And we've reduced that by over 95% by using AI to actually help in the metadata generation itself. And that's applied now across the board for many different business processes that IBM has. That's the same kind of principle that was used to be able to do that. So that foundation essentially enables you to go after that cycle time reduction right off the bat. So when you get to a situation like a COVID-19 situation, which demands urgent action, your foundation is already geared to deliver on that.
So I think actually we might have a graphic, and then the second graphic, guys, if you bring up the second one, I think this is, Inderpal, what you're talking about here, that sort of 95% reduction. Guys, if you could bring that up, we'll take a look at it. So this is maybe not a COVID use case. Yeah, here it is. So that 95% reduction in cycle time, improvement in data quality, what we talked about, there's actually some productivity metrics, right? This is what you're talking about here in this metadata example, correct?
Yes. The metadata, right, it's so central to everything that one does with data. I mean, it's basically data about data. And this is really the business metadata that we're talking about, which is once you have data in your data lake, if you don't have business metadata describing what that data is, then it's very hard for people who are trying to do things to determine whether they even have access to the right data or not. And typically this process has been done manually because somebody looks at the data, they looks at the fields, then they describe it, and it could easily take months. And what we did was we essentially used a deep learning and a natural language processing approach, looked at all the data that we've had historically over at IBM, and we've automated the metadata generation. So whether it was, you were talking about the data relevant for COVID-19 or for our supply chain or for our accounts receivable process, any one of our business processes, this is one of those fundamental steps that one must go through to be able to get your data ready for action. And if you're able to take that cycle time for that step and reduce it by 95%, you can imagine the acceleration across.
One of the other tenets of data ops is really the ability across the organization for everybody to have visibility. Communications is very key. We've got another graphic that I want to show around the organizational, in the right regime. And this is a complicated situation for a lot of people, but it's imperative that organizations, bring in the right stakeholders and actually identify those individuals that are going to participate so that there's full visibility. Everybody understands what their roles are.
Yes, I believe what you're going to show up is actually my organization, but I think it's very, very illustrative of what one has to set up to be able to pull off the kind of impact that I talked about. So let's say we talked about that central data and AI platform that's driving the entire enterprise, and you're infusing AI into key business processes like the supply chain to then create applications like the operational risk insights that we talked about, and then extend it over to a fast emerging and changing situation like the COVID-19. You need an organization that obviously reflects the technical aspects of the platform, right? So you have to have a data engineering arm and an AI arm, also the governance arm that I talked about, where you have to produce a set of standards and implement them and enforce them so that you're able to make this end-to-end impact. And then there's also there's an adoption arm where there's a group that reports into me, a very, very empowered group, which essentially has to convince the rest of the organization to adopt. And then we've also got a data officer council that I chair, and that has to do with the people who are the chief data officers of the individual business units that we have. And they're kind of my extended team into the rest of the organization. And we leverage them both from a adoption of the platform standpoint, but also in terms of defining and enforcing standards.
There's a lot of learnings. Do you think that organizations will rethink business resiliency in this context, that they might sub-optimize profitability, for example, to be more prepared for crises like this with better business resiliency? And what role would data play in that?
So, no, it's a very good question and timely question, Dave. You have to respond very, very quickly to those. You will end up laying out a foundation pretty much like we did, which enables you to really accelerate your pipeline. right? So the data ops pipelines we talked about, there's a lot of automation so that you can react very quickly. Data ingestion very, very rapidly, that you're able to, do that kind of thing. The metadata generation, just the entire pipeline that we're talking about, that you're able to respond and very quickly bring in new data and then aggregate it at the right levels, infuse it into the workflows, and then deliver it to the right people at the right time. Enterprises will, that will become a must. Now, but once you do that, you could argue that there is a cost associated with doing that, but we know that the cycle time reductions on things like that, they can run, I gave you the example of 95%. On average, we see like a 70% end-to-end cycle time reduction where we've implemented the approach, and that's been pretty pervasive within IBM across our business processes. So that, in essence, then actually becomes a driver for profitability. So yes, it might, this might back people into doing that, but I would argue that that's probably something that's going to be very good long term.
That end-to-end cycle time compression is huge, and I like what you're saying, because it's not just a reduction in the expected loss during a crisis. There's other residual benefits to the organization.
Okay, so we heard from Inderpal the importance of metadata and the role of deep learning and natural language processing to automate metadata generation. And I really like that last answer, because it means I'm not just buying insurance, I can actually deliver other tangible benefits to the organization. Now we're going to hear from Itumeleng Manali, who is a data expert at Standard Bank of South Africa. She has a great story to tell. Let's take a listen.
When I was reflecting on this before this interview, I realized that our very first use case of data ops was probably when we implemented Information Analyzer in our business unit, simply because it was the first time that IT and business, as well as data professionals, came together to spec the use case. And then we would literally, in an agile fashion, with a multidisciplinary team, come together to make sure that we got the outcomes that we required. I mean, for you to firstly get a data quality management paradigm where we moved from 6% quality at some point from our client data, now we're sitting at 99%, and that 1% literally is just a timing issue. To get from 6 to 99, you have to make sure that the entire value chain is engaged. So our business partners were the fundamental determinant of the business rules to apply in terms of what does quality mean? What are the criteria for quality? And then what we do is translate that into what we put in the catalog and ensure that the profiling rules that we run are against those business rules that were defined at first. So you'd have upfront determination of the outcome with business, and then the team would go into an agile cycle of maybe 2-week sprints where we develop certain things, have stand-ups come together, and then the output would be dashboarded in a prototype kind of fashion where business then gets to go double check the outcome. So that was the first iteration, I would say. We've become much more mature at it, and we've got many more use cases now. And there's actually one that's quite exciting that we recently achieved over the end of 2019 into the beginning of this year. We had long kind of achieved the compliance and the regulatory burning platform issues. And now we are in a place of, I think, opportunity and luxury, where we can now find use cases that are pertinent to business execution and business productivity. The one that comes to mind is we're 158 years old as an organization, right? So this bank was born before technology. It was also born in the days of like no integration, because every branch was a standalone entity. You'd have these big ledgers that transactions were documented in. And I think once every 6 months or so, these ledgers would be taken by horse-drawn carriage to a central place to go reconcile between branches, etc. But the point is, if that is your legacy, the initial kind of ERP implementations would have been focused on process efficiency based on old ways of accounting for transactions and allocating information. So it was not optimized for the 21st century. Our architecture has had huge legacy burden on it. And so going into a place where you can be agile with data is something that we're constantly working towards. So we get to a place where we have hundreds of branches across the country, and all of them obviously selling to clients, servicing clients as usual, and not being able for any person leading sales teams or executional teams, they were not able in a short space of time to see the impact of their tactics from a data perspective, from a reporting perspective. We were in a place where, in some cases, based on how our ledgers roll up and the reconciliation between various systems and accounts work, it would take you 6 weeks to verify whether your tactics were effective or not, because to actually see the revenue hitting our general ledger and our balance sheet might take that long. That is an ineffective way to operate in such a competitive environment. So what you had are frontline sales agents literally manually documenting the sales that they had made, but not being able to verify whether that or not is bringing revenue until 6 weeks later. So what we did then is we sat down and defined all the requirements from a reporting perspective. And the objective was to move from 6 weeks latency to 24 hours. And even 24 hours is not perfect. Our ideal would be that by close of day, you're able to see what you've done for that day. But that's the next epic that we'll go through. However, we literally had the frontline teams defining what they'd want to see in a dashboard, the business teams defining what the business rules behind the quality and the definitions would be. And then we had an entire analytics team and the data management team working around sourcing the data, optimizing it, curating it, and making sure that the latency is cut down. That's, I think, our latest use case for DataOps. And now we're in a place where people can look at a dashboard. It's a cube, it's self-service. They can log on at any time and see the sales that they've made, which is very important right now in the time of COVID-19 from a productivity and executional competitiveness perspective.
So those are two great use cases at Kumalang. So the first one, going from data quality 6% to 99%. I mean, 6% is all you do is spend time arguing about the data. It kills productivity. Right. And then 99% you're there. And you said it's just basically a timing issue. There's latency in the timing. And then the second one is instead of paving the cow path with an outdated, ledger, Barrett data process, take 6 weeks, you've now compressed that down to 24 hours. You want to get to end of day. So you've built in the agility into your data pipeline. I'm going to ask you then, so when GDPR hit, were you able to very quickly leverage this capability and comply, and then maybe other compliance edict as well?
Well, actually, what we just did now was post GDPR for us. And we got GDPR right about 3 years ago, but literally all we got right was reporting for risk and compliance purposes. The use cases that we have now are really around business opportunity, less so the risk. So we prioritize compliance reporting a long time ago. We're able to do real-time reporting from a single transaction perspective, suspicious transactions, etc., to our Reserve Bank and our governors. So from that perspective, that was what was prioritized in the beginning, which was the initial crisis. So what you found is an entire engine geared towards making sure that data quality was correct for reporting and regulatory purposes. But really, that is not the be-all and end-all of it. And if that's all we did, I believe we really would not have succeeded, or could have said we succeeded, because data monetization is actually the panacea. The leveraging of data for business opportunity is actually then what tells you whether you've got the right culture or not. you're just doing it to comply, then it means the hearts and minds of the rest of the business still aren't in the data game.
Okay, so you heard from Atumalang the impact on data quality. Just an astounding improvement. Now, the video you're watching was created from a set of much longer interviews, and those will be available after the crowd chat. We'll post a link into the chat. What we want to do next is really get into the tech and the tooling with Steve Lewick and Victoria. And then Caitlin weighs in with some thoughts on where to get started. Let's listen.
I want to get into a little bit into the tech. Steve, I wonder if you could tell us, what's the tech? We have this bevy of tools. I mentioned a number of them up front. You've got different data stores. You've got open source tooling. You've got IBM tooling. What are the critical components of the technology that people should be thinking about tapping and architecting?
Sure. From an ingestion perspective, we're trying to do a lot of kind of Python frameworks and scalable ingestion type frameworks. On the catalog side, I think what we've done is gone with IBM Cloud Pak, which provides a platform for a lot of these tools to stay integrated together. So things from the discovery of data sources, the cataloging, the documentation of those data sources, and then all the way through the actual advanced analytics and Python models and our models and the open source side, combined with the ability to do some data prep and refinery work. Having that all in an integrated platform was a key to us for us to roll out kind of more of these tools in bulk as opposed to having the point solutions. So that's been a big focus area for us. And then on the analytics side and the web services side, there's a lot of different components you can go into, whether it's MuleSoft, whether it's AWS and some of the native functionalities out there. You mentioned before Kafka and Kinesis streams and different streaming technologies. Those are all the ones that are kind of in our toolbox that we're starting to look at.
So, and one of the keys here is we're trying to make decisions in as close to real time as possible. What are some of the key tools that you're familiar with, that you've used, that really have enabled you to operationalize the data pipeline?
So Cloud Pak, to me, definitely brings everything to the table in a one-stop shop type of environment. Informatica also, though, is working on the same thing, and I would tell you that they haven't come up with a solution that really comes close to what IBM's done with Cloud Pak for data. I'd be interested to see if they can bring that on the horizon, but really IBM's suite of tools allows for profiling, quality analytics, right? Metadata management, access to DB2 Warehouse on Cloud. Those are the tools that I've worked in my past to implement, as well as Cloud Object Store, to bring all that together to provide that one-stop shop. At Northwestern, right, we're working right now with Calibra. I think Calibra is a great set of tool, or a great governance catalog, right? But that's really what it's truly made for, is it's a governance catalog. You have to bring some other pieces to the table in order for it to serve up all that Cloud Pak does today, which is the advanced profiling, the data virtualization that Cloud Pak enables today, the machine learning at the level where you can actually work with R and Python code in Jupyter Notebooks inside of Cloud Pak. That's some of the pieces, right, that are missing in some of the other vendors' tools today.
When I think about DevOps, one of the things that we're measuring is the elapsed time to deploy applications start to finish. We're measuring the amount of rework that has to be done, the quality of the deliverable. What are the KPIs, Victoria, that are indicators of success in operationalizing the data pipeline?
Oh, I would definitely say your ability to deliver quickly, right? So how fast can you deliver? Is that quicker than what you've been able to do in the past, right? What is the user experience like, right? So have you been able to measure what the amount of time was, right, that users were spending to bring information to the table in the past versus have you been able to reduce that time to delivery, right, of information, business answers to business questions? Those are the key performance indicators to me that tell you that the suite that we've put in place today, right, it's providing information quickly. I can get my business answers quickly, but quicker than I could before, and the information is accurate.
Steve, anything you'd add to that?
I think she covered a lot of the key components around the data quality scoring, right, for all the different data attributes, coming up with a metric around how to measure that, and then showing that trend over time to show that it's getting better. The other one that we're doing is just around overall data availability. How much data are we providing to our users, and showing that trend.
So last question. So I said at the top, that every application is going to need to be infused with AI this decade. Otherwise, that application is not going to be as competitive as it should be. And so for those that are maybe stuck in their journey, don't really know where to get started, I'll start with Caitlin and go to Victoria and then Steve, bring us home. What advice would you give to people that need to get going on this?
My advice is, I think if you poll the folks that are either producing or accessing your data and figure out what the greatest pain points. I mentioned some of the data management challenges we were seeing. These processes were taking weeks and prone to error, highly manual. So that was ripe for AI projects. So identifying those use cases, I think, that are really causing the most pre-work and manual effort. You can move really quickly. And as you build this platform out, you're able to spin those up in an accelerated fashion. I think identifying that and figuring out the business impact you're able to drive very early on, you can get those going and start really seeing the value.
Great. Vic?
Yeah, I would actually say Caitlin hit it on the head. What I would probably add to that, right, is the first and foremost, in my opinion, right, the importance around this is data governance. You need to implement a data governance at an enterprise level. Many organizations will do it, but they'll have silos of governance. You really need an enterprise data governance platform that consists of a true framework of an operational model charters, right? You have data domain owners, data domain stewards, data custodians. All that needs to be defined. And while that may take some work in the beginning, right, the payoff down the line is that much more. It's allowing your business to truly own the data. Once they own the data and they take part in classifying the data assets for technologists and for analysts, right, you can start to eliminate some of the technical debt.
Thank you. And Steve, bring us home. Advice for your peers that want to get started.
Sure. I think the key for me too is like those guys have talked about. I think everything they said is valid and accurate. The thing I would add is from a starting perspective. If you haven't started, start, right? Don't try to overthink it, overplan it. Just get started. Just do something. Really look at how do you focus on that enablement. And then the last comment would just be on scale. Everything should be focused on scale. What you think is a one-time process today, you're going to do it again. We've all been there. You're going to do it 1,000 times again. So prepare for that. Prepare for that you're going to do everything 1,000 times, and start to instill that culture within your organization.
Great advice, guys.
Okay, so there you have it. Now it's your turn. Hop into the crowd chat, log in with Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Twitter is recommended. Ask questions, answer questions, and share with the community. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the crowd chat.